Can Ferrari really fight the 2025 championship? Or Hamilton's arrival has only amplified Maranello's internal problems? Ferrari arrives at the Austria Grand Prix in a mixture of unfulfilled expectations and accumulated frustrations. The start of the 2025 season has been anything but stable for the Scuderia, which currently occupies the second place in the Construction Championship with 183 points. But that position hides a disturbing reality. McLaren, undisputed leader, has reached 374 points. The difference of 191 points is not only numerically alarming, but symbolically represents the distance between the promises of the preseason and the real execution on the track. Maranello's team started the season loaded with renewed hope. The arrival of Lewis Hamilton was not a simple media signing, but a statement of intentions. After years of inconsistent results and questionable technical decisions, Ferrari opted for British heptacampion as a pillar of a new era. Hamilton, with his vast experience and reputation of transforming teams, generated a radical change aura. In parallel, the car was almost completely redesigned, which reinforced the narrative of technical and sports renaissance. But it was soon clear that this paradigm shift, far from stabilizing the team, plunged it into a deeply complex transition stage. On track, the results have been far from expectations. Charles Leclerc, who maintains his role as a key figure of the team, has been the most constant in terms of performance. He has achieved 3 podiums so far this season and adds 104 points. However, its progress has been hindered by an extremely unpredictable car and strategic errors that have cost critical positions. On the other hand, Hamilton has had to travel a more pronounced learning curve of the anticipated. Its total of 79 points places it behind Leclerc, reflecting not only the difficulty of adapting to the new technical environment, but also the problematic nature of the car. In his debut with Ferrari in Australia, he barely added a point, and in China he lived a weekend as chaotic as alerting. But beyond the points, the worrying thing is the lack of a clear competitive identity. Ferrari alternates weekends where it seems to have the rhythm to fight the podium, with others in which it struggles to get into the top 10. Inconsistency is the most characteristic feature of its season. To this is added the media pressure, the constant comparison between its two pilots, and the growing anxiety in Maranello for not seeing immediate results after the deep technical changes. Each race becomes an exam for all involved: engineers, strategists, and pilots. Austria, with its medium and high-speed route, represents a very particular challenge. Not only tests the aerodynamic stability of the SF25, but also the internal cohesion of the equipment. With McLaren escaped in the table, Red Bull looking for solutions after drastic changes in his alignment, and Mercedes resurfaces strongly, Ferrari cannot afford another false step. In this context, Austria GP is not simply the 11th race of the year. It is an emotional, technical, and sports hinge that can mark the beginning of a comeback, or the beginning of resignation. Ferrari's greatest enemy in 2025 has not been McLaren, nor the adaptation of Hamilton, not even the strategic decisions on track. His most feared rival has been at home since the first kilometer, the SF25. This car, proudly announced as a technical revolution regarding its predecessor, has become a constant source of confusion for engineers and pilots equally. And not because it lacks potential, but because that potential seems unattainable under normal competition conditions. The root of the problem lies in the concept of the car. Ferrari decided to redesign practically 99% of the vehicle, in a bold attempt to correct the limitations of SF24. But in the process, it introduced a structural complexity so high that it has made SF25 an unstable, temperamental, and extremely difficult to configure machine. Each small change in the setup can cause dramatic reactions on the track, and that has condemned the pilots to an uncertainty environment where what worked in a free session can become an absolute disaster in classification or career. One of the most compromised technical elements is pull rod-type rear suspension. Ferrari opted for this scheme seeking to improve aerodynamic efficiency, but in practice it has been too flexible, unable to provide the necessary stiffness to stabilize the car in high-speed curves or in rapid changes of direction. The result is a progressive loss of aerodynamic load that intensifies as the race progresses, generating erratic behavior that affects the return rhythm after return. The car can run into a curve and violate violently when leaving the pilot without clear confidence or references. From the pilot's point of view, this is a nightmare. No return feels the same as the previous one. The braking points are altered, weight transfers are unpredictable, and the feeling of control disappears as soon as the car begins to lose adhesion. Even pilots with the technical level of Leclerc or Hamilton's experience have recognized feeling frustrated at the wheel, unable to translate their talent into consistent performance. And the most alarming thing is that Ferrari has not yet found a definitive solution. Each race implies emergency adjustments, patches to fundamental problems that are not solved from the root. The technical team works against the time, but the changes require time and track validation. Meanwhile, SF25 is still an unpredictable car. A wolf with lamb's skin, imposing in simulations, erratic in reality. This situation raises a disturbing question for Ferrari. Do they have time to tame the beast before the championship is completely escaped? Or are they fighting a technical architecture that, in their essence, is condemned to inconsistency? Austria is not just one more career in the calendar. For Ferrari, this Grand Prix represents an emotional and technical threshold. The Red Bull Ring is one of the most demanding circuits in terms of aerodynamic balance, braking stability and rising traction. And for a car as temperamental as the SF25, which has been unable to stay in a constant performance window, each Spielberg curve is a latent threat. But at the same time, it is an unbeatable opportunity to show concrete recovery signals. The characteristics of the circuit expose precisely the deepest weaknesses of Ferrari. 3 DRS areas, strong braking from high speed and lifting changes that test both the stiffness of the chassis and the rear suspension response. Elements that the SF25 has not yet managed to dominate. Here, if the car has weight or control transfer problems in the traction phase, the punishment in time per return will be brutal. And they know. That is why Austria is not only a sports event, but a public examination of his engineering and his ability to adapt under pressure. In addition, the external context does not favor. McLaren arrives in a state of grace. Red Bull has reconfigured his alignment by betting on immediate experience and performance, and Mercedes has demonstrated an ascending progression curve. Ferrari, on the other hand, faces the risk of stagnating in a narrative that already knows, that of broken promises, eternal restructuring and wasted talent. The pressure does not only come from the paddock or the media, it comes from its own history. Each race without Victoria feeds the ghost of 2007, the last pilot title. And that shadow weighs more and more on the team. Internally, decisions taken in Austria can mark the rest of the year. If the SF25 shows inconsistencies again, it will be inevitable to consider drastic measures. Partial redesign of the chassis, complete rear suspension, or even changes in the technical organization chart. The margin to continue adjusting superficially sold out. What is at stake is the credibility of the technical project that should start a new era. And with every race that passes, that speech loses strength. On a human level, the challenge is also monumental. Charles Leclerc has maintained the composure, but has already shown signs of frustration. His touch with Hamilton in China was a symptom of internal tension that can climb if the results do not accompany. Hamilton, meanwhile, has begun to cut differences in rhythm, but its margin of error is zero. He knows that each career without results reinforces criticism about his decision to leave Mercedes. And although its performance has improved, its real influence on the development of the car is still limited. His experience will be key in Austria, but even that may not be enough if the car continues to betray those who drive it. This Grand Prix also raises a vital question for the leadership of Frederic Vasseur. How much more can be expected before declaring that the SF25 needs a deep reformulation? Is Ferrari ready to recognize that his technical concept 2025 has failed? Or will he bet on immobility, waiting for a miracle of mid-season? Austria is more than a midpoint of the calendar. It is a point of psychological, technical, and sports inflection. If Ferrari does not give clear signals to improve here, I could lose more than points. He could lose the faith of his hobby, the internal confidence of the team, and something much more difficult to recover, the credibility that he is still able to build a champion car. The great unknown is not only if Ferrari can win in Austria. The question that really defines this moment is whether Ferrari can at least be predictable. Because in modern Formula One, consistency is the basis of any serious attempt to play a championship. It is not just sporadic podiums or brilliant actions under exceptional conditions. It is about building a clear technical identity, a coherent line of development, and a structure that does not collapse at each new challenge of the calendar. Today, the most iconic team in the story of the category is located at a crossroads. Or find the way back to competitive solidity, or resign to be a team of flashes, of isolated moments, of nostalgia rather than the future. The season is not lost in the mathematician, but the symbolic weighs as much as numerical in this sport. And what is at stake is not simply the position in the table, but the sensation of course. Austria can be the scenario of a declaration of principles. A weekend that returns to the team internal trust, external credibility, and above all, a roadmap for the second section of the year. But it can also be the confirmation that the 2025 technical project was born with fissures that cannot be repaired with patches, but require deep redesign and structural decisions that go beyond track performance. So the question is open. Not as an empty doubt, but as an invitation to reflect. Should Ferrari insist with the concept of SF25 and trust its evolution? Or is it time to accept that this car, despite its promises, is not a base on which to build a winning season? And if so, how willing the team is to make painful but necessary decisions? Now it's your turn. What would you do instead of Vasseur? Would you bet everything on technical evolution? Would you rethink the car for 2026 from now on? Or do you think the real problem is beyond aerodynamic design?